Her brothers locked the basement door and told the neighbors she'd gone to live with an aunt. Lena Rose Whitman, then 14, didn't scream. By the time she emerged 17 years later, her name had been declared dead and their inheritance sealed. But the will buried behind the broken tile didn't forget her. She'd lost her childhood, not her claim. And when they tried to torch the evidence, the cameras were already rolling. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. I used to whisper my name through the air vent, just to remember I had one. Lena. Software quiet, just enough sound to feel like proof, not loud enough to echo, not brave enough to defy. Now I sign it. Lena Rose Whitman. The pen makes a hushed drag against the legal document in front of me. I don't flinch. Don't smile. I just watch the ink dry while the attorney across from me shifts in his seat, his mouth already moving into whatever polite congratulations he's been practicing. Congratulations, Miss Whitman. The title transfer's complete. I nod once. No handshake, no thanks. Just a sharp breath through the nose like I'm waking from a long, heavy sleep. Then, I was 14 the day the lock clicked shut, the day the floorboards became my ceiling. Colby's voice had been the last thing I heard clearly. It's for her own good. Wade added, she's a danger to herself and the house. You saw what she did after the funeral. But I hadn't done anything except cry too long, stay quiet too much, hug the banister too tightly. Their solution was the basement. One flickering bulb, one warped mattress, and a door with 3 separate bolts. They told the neighbors I'd been sent to live with an aunt in Poughkeepsie. We didn't have an aunt in Poughkeepsie. And the basement didn't have windows. Just concrete, mildew, and the vent. It was barely a slit in the corner of the ceiling. Old, rust-edged and sharp. Air moved through it in uneven pulses like the house was breathing around me. Some nights it carried the scent of cigarette smoke or burning eggs, other times just cold. That vent became my only mirror, my only link. I whispered into it every day. Lena. Just once. Because if I could still say my name, they hadn't taken it. Not yet. Time moved like syrup in shattered glass. I kept track with lint strings pulled from my socks, with scratches on the underside of the wooden stairs. I learned to tell morning from afternoon by the sound of the fridge upstairs or the way the pipes moaned during Wade's showers. I wasn't unstable. I was unwanted. And they'd found a way to bury me without digging. Weeks blended, then years. I grew into my bones while they hardened around me. And then one day, I heard something different. Wade's voice through the vent, louder than usual, impatient. She's not in the will. Why are we waiting? The market's up. We unload it, take the cash, and leave this shithole behind. Colby mumbled something I couldn't make out, but Wade snapped again. We'll forge what we have to. She's legally dead. No one's coming back for her. My body froze before my brain caught up. They weren't just leaving me, they were cashing in. That night, after their voices faded upstairs and the silence returned to its usual press of concrete and dust, I started tearing through the corners of the room. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. Rage sharpened into action. Something told me the truth had to live somewhere. And it did. Behind the old boiler, half covered in dust and mouse droppings, I found a warped, mold-wrinkled envelope. It looked like it had been dropped, or discarded, years ago. Water-stained, torn across the edge, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Final will, Margaret Whitman. My mother's name, curved and careful, the way she always signed school permission slips, as if her signature was a promise. I held it with both hands, barely breathing, as if the paper might vanish if I gripped it too hard. This wasn't just old paper. This was leverage. This was truth. This was mine. It wasn't just ink. It was proof that someone once chose me. I sat cross-legged on the cold basement floor, holding the envelope like it might vanish if I blinked. The paper inside was swollen from water damage, edges curled like scorched leaves, the handwriting still legible in places but faded around the creases. My mother's name, Margaret L. Whitman, looped in her steady script across the top. She had touched this, folded it with care, trusted it to say what she couldn't. I unfolded it slowly, the way you peel a bandage off skin you're afraid to see beneath. Words appeared between the watermarks. Beneficiaries, declarations, legalese I couldn't always parse. But then, clear as breath on glass, came the line that cracked something wide open. I leave the Pine Hollow estate in full and without condition to my daughter, Lena Rose Whitman. No mention of Wade, no mention of Colby, just me. It was like a match had been struck inside my chest. The basement didn't feel cold for a full minute. My body buzzed, legs trembling under the weight of everything I now knew. They hadn't just locked me up, they'd stolen what was mine. I reread it twice, fingers trembling with each pass. Some of the ink had bled, but not the parts that mattered. I could still make out the notary stamp, faint but intact. The date, 2 months before the accident. The envelope was addressed to the county courthouse, but had never been mailed. Had they found it first? Or had she hidden it here, knowing they would? I folded it back as carefully as I could, slipped it into the envelope and scanned the basement. There was only one place safe enough to hide it. Along the east wall behind the broken water heater, a ceramic tile had come loose months ago. I'd pried it out once, trying to dig an escape route with a spoon. Useless then, useful now. I wedged the envelope behind the hollow space, pressed the tile back in place, and marked the corner with a single soot dot from the candle stub I used when the light bulb fizzled. No one ever checked this side of the basement, not even when they threw down a tray of cold spaghetti or stomped overhead. The will was safe, and so was my name. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake under the thin blanket, staring into the ceiling's shadows, replaying every moment since the funeral. The lies, the locked door, the stolen inheritance, and something unfamiliar bloomed beside the rage. Intention. I had something to reclaim, and that changed everything. I began listening more closely, counting footsteps on the floorboards. Wade was heavier, he dragged his boots. Colby moved faster, lighter, nervous energy in his gait. I mapped their habits, when the fridge opened, when they slammed the bathroom door, when the house fell into sleep. I tested the lock every day with whatever I could find, the snapped leg of a chair, a bent fork I kept tucked into the mattress lining. Nothing worked yet, but I filed down corners. I timed the screws. I learned what creaked and what gave. When the walls were dry enough, I drew maps in soot, outlines of the basement, guesses about the kitchen above me, the hallway, the exits. I even marked where the vent lines probably ran, based on the air shifts. It was slow, quiet war, and then winter finally bit through the house. I knew it was bad because the cold got still, not sharp, just silent. Snow dampens the world, even underground, the kind of snow that makes the trees outside disappear. I heard them arguing upstairs, Colby saying something about getting the hell out before the road ice is over, Wade cursing about the truck battery, and then, just like that, silence. No footsteps, no music, no fridge. I pressed my ear to the vent. Nothing. They were gone. And for the first time in years, I was alone with the lock. The metal bolt cracked with a sound I'll never forget. Not loud, not triumphant, but a dull, reluctant snap, like the house itself was surrendering. I stood frozen, the rusted chair leg still warm in my shaking hands, staring at the broken lock like it might glue itself back together. I hadn't expected it to work, not really, but there it was, cracked metal, fractured wood. The door creaked open. For a heartbeat, I just stood there. The smell of cold air slid down the stairs, mixing with the years of damp concrete and mildew and silence. I didn't let myself hope. Not fully. Not yet. I climbed the stairs barefoot, each step a new kind of pain. The floorboards at the top felt alien beneath me. Slick linoleum, too clean, too quiet. A frying pan sat on the counter. 2 mugs in the sink. Their absence hung over everything like breath held too long. Outside, the wind howled. The snow was already piling against the door's glass, a thick blur of white swirling under a charcoal sky. The old farmhouse moaned against it. I didn't stop to take anything. Not food, not a coat. Just a faded backpack I found in the hall closet, and the soot map I'd folded in half and stuffed into the waistband of my pants. I knew where the road was. I knew how to get there. I pushed through the back door and the snow hit me like water in the lungs, sharp, immediate, unforgiving. My skin lit up with it. My toes went numb within seconds. But I didn't stop. The field stretched wide, untouched, like no one had ever walked it before. My legs screamed with each step, calves seizing, lungs burning from the cold. The world spun in white noise and wind, and I moved through it like a ghost clawing its way back into the world of the living. I didn't cry. Not yet. I needed the air for breathing. I hit the road sometime after midnight. I couldn't see the moon, but I could hear distant tires. Slow, cautious, real. I raised my arm. I didn't even look up to see whose headlights they were. I just raised it, stiff as bone. The driver was a woman, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a fleece jacket zipped to her chin. Her radio was playing soft country. She didn't ask questions, not the ones I expected. She just blinked and said, "Jesus, girl, get in." When she asked my name, I answered without thinking. Ellie. Ellie Rose. I never looked back. We reached Albany by morning. Gray city haze, steam rising from subway grates, salt on the sidewalks. I told her I had a cousin nearby. She didn't press. She gave me $20 and a grocery bag full of snack cakes and said, "Stay warm, Ellie Rose." The shelter on 9th Street didn't look like salvation, just a square brick building with rusted steps and a buzzer that stuck when you pressed it. I stood there for a long time, too frozen to move, until a woman with a clipboard opened the door and didn't ask who I was. They gave me clean socks, a toothbrush, warm broth in a paper cup. The bed was plain, thin mattress, thin blanket, but it was off the ground. It had a lamp. And when I lay down and pulled the blanket over my chest, the weight of it, of safety, of warmth, of choice, made me cry harder than the cold ever had. Loud, broken sobs I tried to muffle into the pillow until the nurse came by. She didn't flinch, just sat beside me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "You look like someone they forgot to look for." I nodded. Couldn't speak. Later that night they took my information, name, age, fingerprints, for safety, for procedure. The technician stared at the screen a little too long. Then she called someone in, a man in uniform. He looked at me with confusion first, then disbelief. My file blinked red. Missing child, presumed deceased. The world forgot me, but my fingerprints didn't. The moment the alert pinged on their screen, the energy in the shelter shifted. What had been soft became sharp. What had been warm turned cold. The staff huddled behind a half-closed door. Phones buzzed. Someone whispered, "This can't be right." But it was. By the time the Albany police arrived, I was already sitting in a private room with my hands folded tightly in my lap, the same hands they'd scanned hours earlier, the same ones that tied me to a girl declared legally dead at 15. She never left that basement, but I had. 2 officers stood in the doorway, one tall and quiet, the other chewing gum like it owed him money. "You got a name?" the taller one asked, flipping open a notepad. "Lena Rose Whitman," I said. "Not Ellie Rose. Not anymore." He paused. "You sure?" "I was born July 17th, 1990, in Pine Hollow. My parents were Margaret and Thomas Whitman. I disappeared in 2004. The official record says I'm dead." "And where have you been since?" I met his eyes, locked in the basement of my family's house, by my brother's. That silenced him, for all of 5 seconds. "Colby and Wade Whitman?" the gum chewer chimed in. "That Colby?" "Yes." He chuckled like we were swapping bar talk. "Hell, I used to play poker with that guy. Sheriff Harlan still does, last I heard." I didn't move. I didn't blink. What they did to me wasn't poker. The official report was filed. Missing person found, condition stable. But within 24 hours, the system did what it always does when women crawl out of basements too late to make headlines. It shifted the narrative, The sheriff back in Pine Hollow got on a phone call with Albany PD, spoke in vague terms. "She's troubled," he said. "There's a long family history there. It's complicated." The case was downgraded to a domestic misunderstanding. Not abuse, not kidnapping, not false imprisonment, just a dispute. Child Protective Services declined emergency action. "No current threat," they wrote. "No minor children involved. Insufficient evidence." I could have screamed. I didn't. Instead, I asked the shelter staff for paper. I wrote everything down, from the first time the lock clicked shut, to the will I found hidden behind the tile, to the snowstorm that finally let me slip away. One of the staff therapists, her name was Sonia, read it all with a face like stone. Then she folded it in half, picked up the phone, and dialed someone named Marcia. "Civil rights attorney," she explained. "She doesn't take every case, but she might take yours." Marcia arrived the next morning. No suit, no briefcase, just a black wool coat, tortoiseshell glasses, and eyes that never missed anything. She sat across from me in the same folding chair the officers had used. Only this time, I felt heard. "You want justice," she said. "I get it. But here's the truth. The criminal courts, they fail women like you all the time. Judges drag it out. DAs hesitate. Your brothers have connections, and your file says you're already dead. So what do I do?" She smiled slowly. "You take what they care about, the house, the land, the legacy. You drag them into civil court and make them explain how a dead girl just walked out of a snowbank holding a will they buried." Something inside me clicked. I nodded. Marcia's voice dropped lower. "We don't need a courtroom to prove they hurt you. We need a courtroom to make it cost them." That afternoon, she filed a civil claim with the Albany County Supreme Court on my behalf. Lena Rose Whitman versus Wade and Colby Whitman. The suit named me rightful heir to the Pine Hollow estate under the last valid will of Margaret Whitman. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. But when I signed that filing with my full name, my hand didn't shake. The lawsuit was real. So was I. You don't need brute force to break someone. You need timing, leverage, ink that stains in court. Marcia filed the emergency injunction on a Tuesday morning, her voice even, her posture crisp, her words clipped with surgical precision. By noon, the Pine Hollow estate was frozen, legally immobilized. Wade and Colby couldn't sell it, couldn't mortgage it, couldn't so much as upgrade the plumbing without court approval. I imagined them in their separate corners of that house, reading the legal notice, watching their entire inheritance stiffen into stone. I didn't have to imagine their reaction for long. By Friday afternoon, Colby left a voicemail for the courthouse clerk, calling the injunction a fucking joke. Wade sent a 3-sentence email to Marcia's office that read, "More like a threat than a defense." The subject line? "This won't last." They didn't realize what I had tucked behind the broken tile. The original will was still water-wrinkled and fading, but the notary seal remained visible. The signature, my mother's, was unmistakable. We submitted it with an affidavit confirming my identity, along with sworn statements from the shelter workers, the nurse, and the social worker who'd documented the night I emerged from nowhere. It should have been enough. But Colby's lawyer came prepared to smear me back into the shadows. He stood in probate court, thin-lipped and cocky, and submitted what he called indisputable medical documentation. A psych evaluation, dated 2010, signed by Dr. Ezra Grambell. It described me as paranoid, delusional, and prone to hallucinations. It claimed I'd tried to self-harm with household tools, that I invented family trauma for attention. Wade watched from the gallery. Colby crossed his arms like a man expecting to win. I didn't blink, but I did feel the tremor rising inside, the one that reminded me just how easily systems could be manipulated. Then Marcia stood. "No cross-examination needed, Your Honor," she said, "but I'd like to submit something into the record." She walked to the bench and handed the judge a single folded page, a verified obituary. Dr. Ezra Grambell, deceased, October 12, 2011. The evaluation dated 3 years after that. The courtroom didn't gasp. It didn't have to. It just went still. The judge, a silver-haired woman with reading glasses low on her nose, leaned back in her chair and exhaled through her teeth. "I'll take that as sufficient cause to question the authenticity of the respondent's document." Colby shifted. Wade finally looked over at me. I stared back. Blank, calm, no rage, just resolve. The judge tapped her pen against her legal pad. "This court acknowledges the presented will of Margaret Whitman as potentially valid pending further review. The injunction stands. The estate remains frozen." The gavel hit wood with a sound like finality. Outside the courthouse, the air was colder than it looked. Marcia slid on her gloves, already planning the next phase aloud: depositions, asset tracing, ownership history. But I was barely listening. I stood under the brittle sun, looking down at my hands. No cuffs, no locks, just the tremble of blood moving forward. Wade and Colby weren't in cuffs either. Not yet. But they were in something else now, the one trap they never saw coming: process. They could lie, they could sneer, but now they had to sit under oath and speak into a recorder. That was the court's next move. The subpoenas were issued. Wade and Colby were being called to testify. I sat in a narrow observation room with one-way glass, the kind used in police lineups or bad crime dramas. A buzzing fluorescent light hummed above me, relentless. The only sound that mattered, though, came through the speaker embedded in the wall. Low, precise, and cold. Wade was up first. He wore a sport coat that didn't quite fit, the sleeves too short, his hands pale against the fabric like he'd just crawled out of a cave and put on someone else's life. His jaw was locked. Every time the court reporter tapped a key, his mouth twitched. Marcia sat across from him at the conference table, her tone detached, surgical. She didn't have to provoke. Wade unraveled on his own. "So to clarify," she asked, flipping a page, "you're stating that your sister, Lena Whitman, was unstable after your parents' death?" "Yes," Wade said flatly. "And therefore, you believed it was in her best interest to be confined to the basement?" He bristled. "That's not what I said." Marcia paused. "Would you like me to read back your words?" Wade's shoulders tensed. "She wasn't well. We didn't know what else to do." "You didn't consider contacting medical professionals? Social services? Filing for guardianship?" "She couldn't be trusted, especially not with money." That was the first crack, on record. Behind the glass, I pressed my fingertips together to keep from shaking. Not out of fear, not anymore. But because hearing it out loud, with no masks, made something shift in my chest. Not pain, just clarity. They knew what they did. Next came Colby. If Wade had tried to wear authority, Colby wore performance. He leaned back in the chair like it was a bar stool, grinned too often, spoke too casually. "She had episodes," he said, "made stuff up, said Mom was still alive, said we were poisoning her food." "She was 14, Marcia replied. "Exactly." "You said she was delusional. Wade said she was emotionally fragile. Which was it?" Colby hesitated. "In your sworn statement, you mention a psychiatric diagnosis. Can you provide the name of the physician?" Dr. Gramble." "The same Dr. Gramble who died in 2011? Colby blinked. "Twice. Must have been another one." "You said it was at Pine Hollow Medical Center. They've never employed a Gramble. Would you like to revise your answer?" He looked to his lawyer, who suddenly found his pen very interesting. Behind the glass, I didn't move, didn't blink. Marcia shifted forward, calm and cutting. "Let's talk about the will. How did you come to possess a version naming you and your brother as sole beneficiaries?" "It was in Dad's desk," Colby said quickly. "Handwritten or typed?" "Typed. Signed and notarized?" "Yes." She placed a copy of the forged version on the table. Then she placed mine beside it. Colby stared. "You'll notice," Marcia continued, "your document misspells your mother's middle name. Twice. Any explanation?" Silence. "Did you type this yourself, Mr. Whitman?" His jaw clenched. "I'm done talking." The court reporter noted the pause. The lawyer called for a recess. Before they could leave the room, Marcia asked one last question. Soft, surgical. "Do you know where your sister slept for 17 years?" Neither of them answered. Back in the observation room, the audio cut. I breathed for the first time in what felt like an hour. Marcia entered minutes later, peeling off her blazer. Their lawyer floated the idea of a private settlement. I raised an eyebrow. What did you say? I told them we don't negotiate with thieves who bury children alive. A pause. Then, they'll fight. But not for long. The judge wants this on record. Trial date's been set. My pulse slowed, deepened. The time had come. I was going to testify. The judge's ruling gave me temporary control of the Pine Hollow estate while the trial moved forward. The ink wasn't even dry when Marcia handed me the keys, cool, sharp brass with a worn black tag that simply read, Whitman. I stared at them for a long time before I took them. A key is just metal until it opens something you were once locked inside. I arrived just before dusk, alone. The long gravel drive hadn't been plowed properly in years. Snow crunched under my boots, brittle and uneven. Dead leaves drifted across the porch like ghosts waiting to be noticed. I didn't hesitate. The door creaked open like a held breath. The air inside was stale. Dust, wood rot, and something older, something I knew in my bones. The kind of silence that had once been a sentence. My fingers brushed the hallway light switch. The bulb flickered, then held. 17 years, and I still remembered where the creaks were. I moved through each room methodically. The kitchen counters were chipped, cluttered with old coffee mugs and unopened mail. The wallpaper in the den had peeled in strips like snakeskin. One window was cracked at the corner, probably from Wade slamming it too hard during one of his storms of self-righteous fury. But it was the basement door that held me still. Same hinges, same chipped paint, soft from moisture, same warped frame where Wade installed the second lock. I put my hand on the doorknob. It didn't tremble. I opened it. Slowly. The smell hit first. Mold, old copper, earth. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, but I didn't stop. I reached the bottom and stood there, alone, where I had once grown up and grown inward, mapping my own survival in silence. The mattress was still there. So was the cracked mirror, the broken chair leg I'd used to break the lock. My soot maps were mostly gone, smeared or faded, but I found one charcoal line along the far wall, my own handwriting in silence. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began taking photos. Room by room, scar by scar. I documented every scrape, every corner that bore the shape of my confinement. Water damage, old locks, rusted nails, my old initials carved behind a baseboard. Upstairs, I found what I wasn't looking for. In my mother's old bedroom, inside a scorched cedar chest near the closet, I discovered a burned journal, charred at the edges, brittle from heat and time. Some pages had melted together, but one remained intact, dark ink preserved like a secret that refused to die. Keep her safe. I failed. The her was me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the journal in my lap. My mother's handwriting trembled more than I remembered. There were other fragments, mentions of watching Wade too closely and Colby changing. Then nothing. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession. I didn't read the rest. I just photographed that single page and closed the book gently. Later, I uploaded the images to a private cloud drive. Every folder I created was titled the same. Evidence. I was sealing the cracks they left behind. The light outside had dipped below the pines when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Miss Whitman? A woman's voice asked. I'm calling from Crestline Properties. I heard you're managing the Pine Hollow estate? Yes, I said. Well, just a heads up, we've had multiple inquiries from developers and buyers, even some nonprofits. People are circling. Are you accepting showings? I looked out the window at the snow-covered property, the skeletal barn, the black line of woods where I once imagined escape. A chill passed through me, not of fear, of control. Next day, no fresh paint, no staging, no homey candles to cover up the rot. The listing went live with raw edges exposed, just like me. Photos of the basement, the broken tile, the rusted lock still bolted into the doorframe. captioned honestly. Sold as is, structurally sound, history included. The listing made people uncomfortable, which meant it was honest. Developers reached out first, eager men in soft blazers, offering six-figure numbers and demolition plans before stepping foot on the porch. One offered cash the same day. Another pitched a luxury B&B with a restorative rustic aesthetic. But then I got a call from a woman named Dina Morales. She didn't talk about acreage or profit per square foot. She talked about shelter. Dina ran a nonprofit that converted abandoned estates into recovery housing for women fleeing abuse. No uniforms, no walls lined with surveillance, just beds, doors with locks that only locked from the inside, and shared meals cooked without fear. "We're not a shelter," she said. "We're a rebuild." I invited her to see the house. She walked each floor with quiet attention, pausing at the scorch marks in the hallway, the cracked foundation beneath the old pantry, and finally, the basement. Dina didn't flinch at the smell or the stains. She ran her hand along the banister, slow, like she was reading Braille. Then she looked at me. "We'll take it. On your terms." That night, I accepted her offer. No negotiation, no haggling. I didn't want a bidding war. I wanted a reckoning. When word reached Wade and Colby, their lawyer moved fast, filing a last-minute emergency injunction to block the sale. Marcia countered before lunch. The judge denied their motion in under 3 hours. The property was mine to sell, and now I had. It should have felt like peace. But some ghosts scream louder before they leave. A week later, I returned to the house to meet with Dina and her renovation crew. Snow had crusted over the driveway again. The sun was beginning to sink behind the pines when I saw it, spray-painted across the garage door in dripping black strokes. "You die poor." I stood there for a long time. No fear, just something colder than rage settling in my stomach. I called the sheriff. They sent a cruiser and a deputy who looked fresh out of academy training. He jotted notes, took photos, and handed me a card. "If you have reason to believe it was your brother's, you can file a no-contact motion." "I already have one," I said. He cleared his throat. "Then it'll go on record as a violation. We'll also mark the property for patrol." That wasn't enough. I didn't want watch lists. I wanted proof. That night, I installed motion-triggered cameras, 2 facing the front drive, 1 under the eave by the garage, and another tucked into the woodshed facing the house. The next morning, the cameras synced to my phone. The following night, one sent a push alert at 3:11 a.m. I opened the feed and pressed play. The image stuttered in low light, then sharpened. A figure, hooded, familiar. Colby. He moved fast across the gravel in boots, paused at the edge of the garage, looked back, then dropped something on the ground. I tapped to zoom. It wasn't a backpack. It was a gas can. He looked up toward the camera, right at it, and smiled. I hit save, and for the first time since the basement, I smiled too. The camera had him, clear as day. The fire started at 3:17 a.m., 12 feet behind the old barn, just far enough from the main house to be called isolated, just close enough to remind me that some men don't leave, they escalate. The motion alert pinged again as I slept, but this time the camera didn't catch movement. It caught light, a bloom of orange in the lower right frame. Fast, frantic. Then a figure, Colby, again, retreating with a lighter in one hand and the red gas can swinging from the other. He didn't run. He walked. That was the part that stayed with me. I called 911 with a voice like stone, calm, focused. "There's a fire behind my barn," I said, "and I have video of the man who lit it." The fire department arrived first, contained it within 20 minutes, singed grass, scorched fence boards. It hadn't reached the structure, but the intent was unmistakable. This wasn't a drunk mistake. This was a warning. But he'd picked the wrong woman to threaten. By the time the police arrived, I had the footage queued on a tablet. The officer, older, steady hands, watched it twice, no commentary. "That's him," I said. "You're sure? Do you need the birth certificate or the trauma file?" He didn't ask again. Colby was arrested that afternoon outside a gas station 2 towns over. Still had the gas can in the truck bed. Residue matched the fuel used in the fire. He didn't resist, didn't speak. The formal charges hit like dominoes. Arson, violation of a restraining order, attempted property destruction. Then, the real twist. The DA decided to dig deeper. The fire opened the door, and what they found behind it was rot. Sealed court records from Colby's forged documents, discrepancies in Wade's statements, a 911 call from 2007 that had mysteriously never been filed. The DA contacted Marcia. "I think we have enough," he said, "to charge for what happened to her in that basement. False imprisonment, aggravated assault, fraudulent inheritance, conspiracy to commit identity erasure. That last one? I didn't even know it was a charge. Apparently it's rare, but it fit." The DA asked if I'd testify. I didn't need time to think. "I'm ready." I was done being a file in a drawer, a girl in a headline, a voice behind the vent. This time my name wouldn't be whispered. It would be spoken clearly on record into a courtroom mic surrounded by people who could finally see what had been hidden for too long. The media picked it up. The headline read, "Whitman heiress to testify in basement abuse, arson trial heiress," as if I'd grown up with pearls instead of mildew. Marcia prepared me the way she always did. Practical, never patronizing. "They'll try to poke holes in your story. Stay anchored. You're not asking them to believe it all, just to believe you." The night before jury selection, I walked the perimeter of the house one more time. The snow was thinner now, melt pooling around the gravel, revealing stubborn blades of brown grass beneath. The barn still stood, charred on one side. A half-burned oak stump sat beside it, blackened but unbroken. I stood there a long time, not in fear, in presence. This land had buried me, but now it would resurrect me, one line of testimony at a time. Inside the house, I laid out the outfit I would wear in court: black slacks, soft gray blouse, no makeup, but I painted my nails the same shade of plum my mother wore on Sundays. I remembered how her hands looked when she poured tea, how they used to shake when Wade raised his voice. Mine didn't shake anymore. At 6 a.m., I got the call. "Jury selection is beginning. They want you at the courthouse by 10. I looked in the mirror, tied my hair back, and whispered to my reflection, not to soothe myself, but to center. "You're Lena Rose Whitman, and you have nothing left to lose." Tomorrow, I'd take the stand. The courtroom smelled like lemon polish and nerves. Everyone was dressed like they had something to prove. The prosecution in navy, the defense in charcoal, the judge in patience. I took the stand in silence. The bailiff swore me in, and I said, "I do," like I meant it. Marcia stood first. No theatrics, no forced sympathy, just a single question. "Can you tell us what happened to you on January 3rd, 2004? I inhaled once. "My brothers locked me in the basement," I said, eyes steady. "They told the neighbors I'd gone to live with an aunt, but we didn't have an aunt." "And how long were you kept there?" 17 years. No sound in the courtroom, not even a cough, only the soft scratch of someone's pen taking notes they'd never forget. I described the concrete floors, the rusted vent, the rotted mattress that held the shape of my body long after I stopped sleeping on it. I told them about the soot maps, the whispered name I repeated to remember I was real. Lena. I showed them photos I'd taken, the broken chair leg I'd used to pry the lock, the basement door's steel plate drilled into the wood like a coffin lid. Marcia projected an image of the will, the real one, across the screen, the judge nodding silently as the jury followed every stroke of my mother's trembling signature. I could feel Colby's eyes on me like smoke. Wade looked everywhere but my face. The defense tried to tear holes, of course. "Miss Whitman, can you describe your current psychiatric status?" the defense attorney asked, voice slick with condescension. "I passed every evaluation required to testify, including the ones you demanded. And yet, for 17 years, I survived, not because I was unstable, but because I wasn't." He tried bringing up the forged psych evaluation again. Marcia objected before I had to say a word. The judge sustained. Later, they tried to say I was vengeful, that the sale of the house, the lawsuit, the cameras, it was retaliatory. Their words bent. Mine didn't. By the third day, the jury stopped looking at my brothers altogether. They only looked at me. Marcia's closing statement was brief. She didn't beg. She reminded. She was erased, she said. They built a life on her silence. She survived, and now she owns what they buried. Silence filled the room. Even the clerk seemed to breathe slower. Deliberation took less than 4 hours. The foreman stood. We find the defendant, Colby Whitman, guilty on all counts. The words landed like anchors. Arson, false imprisonment, aggravated fraud, conspiracy. Colby didn't blink, just stared ahead, jaw tight, like he still thought he might wake up in control of the house. The judge sentenced him immediately. 7 years without parole, plus restitution, and a restraining order that extended through my natural lifetime. Wade? Wade wasn't convicted criminally. The evidence wasn't as direct, but the civil penalties hit him like a second trial. Fraud, coercion, probate tampering. The estate he thought he'd inherit was now the thing that named him guilty. After the verdict, people clapped. Not loud, not rude, just enough to feel real. I stayed seated. It wasn't a victory parade. It was a eulogy for what they tried to bury. Outside, I stepped into the daylight with a breath that went deeper than it should have. Marcia rested her hand on my shoulder but didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The envelope arrived by certified mail 2 days after the verdict. Plain manila, no return address. But the court seal was stamped in the corner, faint and pressed deep, like something someone meant to forget, but the paper refused to release. Inside was a single sheet, yellowed, handwritten. At first, I didn't recognize it. The script was shakier than I remembered, but as soon as I saw the looped capital L at the top, I knew. My mother. The heading was dated March 3rd, 2006. I stared at it, fingers locked around the edge of the kitchen counter like the tile might give way beneath me. The letter began, "To whom it may concern. If this is being read, it means something has gone wrong. Or maybe finally right. My name is Margaret Whitman. I had 3 children, Lena, Colby, and Wade. If you've found this letter, you need to know that Lena is in danger. And if the boys say she's not, they're lying." The pen pressure varied. Some lines dug so deep I could see the shadow of her hand across the back of the page. Others faded like her courage slipped just enough to shake her resolve. She's not crazy. She's not a threat. But Colby and Wade, they've changed since Tom died. I tried to tell people. No one listened. So I started this, in case no one ever did. There were tears on the paper. Real ones. You can tell when ink runs like that. Ribbons blooming outward but never spilling completely. If Lena is gone, please, for the love of God, protect her name. Find her if she's alive. Help her tell the truth if I never got to. I wanted to save her. I just ran out of time. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know what they did, and I know what they're capable of. Please don't let them win. Mom. The last word was barely legible, just a crooked M trailing into the margin, like she wrote it with her eyes closed. My body folded before I even noticed I'd sat down. The letter trembled in my lap as the first sob cracked through. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't loud. It was deep. All this time, I thought she'd left me behind, that she'd seen the storm coming and turned the other way, but she didn't. She tried. She knew. That was the twist I hadn't been ready for. Not guilt, not proof, but the weight of being remembered. I carried the letter outside under a moon so full it looked staged. The wind cut through the trees and tugged at the corners of the page. My fingers clenched tighter. I didn't cry again. I didn't need to. I took the lighter I used for incense and struck it once. The flame danced against the edge of the letter, hesitated, then spread fast. I didn't toss it. I held it steady until the fire kissed my skin, and then I let it go. The ash curled upward, swallowed by the dark. It wasn't an erasure. It was a release. She had spoken. I had heard her. That was enough. I walked back inside, the air lighter than I remembered it ever being, in Pine Hollow. On the kitchen table, my laptop screen was still glowing. An open tab blinked from where I'd left it the night before. One-way tickets, Albany to Asheville, a new place, a name I'd worn as armor, Ellie Rose, ready to become something more. I clicked purchase, no hesitation, no return flight. The screen flashed, confirmed. I was leaving Pine Hollow behind. For good. The paperwork was short, just 4 pages, but it felt heavier than the court transcripts, the deposition logs, even the notarized will that changed everything. The clerk in Asheville barely glanced at me as she slid the file forward. "Name change approved," she said, stamping it once with a dull thunk. "Ellie Rose Whitman." The ink dried as I exhaled, not from relief, from resolve. Lena had survived. Ellie would live. I left the courthouse and drove east into the mountains, where the roads curved like sentences with no punctuation, and the air smelled like pine and moss and beginnings. I'd found the cottage online, 2 bedrooms, porch slanted with time, paint flaking in long strips like sunburned skin, no furnace, no AC. But the land backed into woods, and when the wind moved, the trees made a sound like breathing. I paid cash. The neighbors waved from porches but didn't ask questions. People in Asheville knew how to leave space around silence. Every morning, I opened the windows wide and stripped the house of its past. Floorboards scrubbed, ceiling tiles torn out, rusted hinges soaked in vinegar until they turned silver again. It was the first place I'd lived where I wasn't waiting to be found. At night, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea and a black notebook. No line was wasted. I wrote in short, sharp sentences, not to document what happened, but to practice the shape of memory under my own terms. Eventually, I found a trauma support circle at the Y. I didn't speak the first week, just listened. By the second, a woman named Joy asked if I could help someone else learn how to write things down. She said, "You have the kind of calm people trust." I laughed under my breath. If only she knew what it had cost me. Soon, I started teaching journaling every Wednesday. Nothing formal, just women sitting in folding chairs passing pens like lifelines. One night, a local reporter showed up, a young woman with short hair and a name badge that said, "Free Citizen." She waited until group was over and approached me with careful posture. "Someone told me you were part of the Whitman case," she said. I looked her dead in the eye. "That name doesn't belong to them anymore." "I'd love to do a story," she said. "You could stay anonymous." I shook my head. "That story's already been told. I'm not writing footnotes to it." She nodded. No pushback. Just left a card I never used. That night, for the first time in my adult life, I slept with the door open. No lock, no chair wedged under the knob, just the soft hush of the woods and the ticking of a clock I didn't have to fear. The next morning, I found a note on my mailbox, scrawled in blue ink. "Heard about what you're doing with the group. I've got an old farmhouse and a vision for something bigger. Ever thought about running a safe house?" It was unsigned, but I knew who left it, a woman named Shauna from group. She rarely spoke but always listened like she was archiving your soul. I walked inside, made a cup of coffee, and stared at the sunrise through the broken slats of my porch railing. Then I grabbed my purse, drove to the hardware store and bought a lock, not for me, for the outside. The trees on the road into Pine Hollow were thinner than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown. When you stop seeing the world through bars, wooden or mental, everything opens, even memory. I came back without telling anyone. No press, no headlines, no courthouse badge. Just me in an old rental car with North Carolina plates and a scarf pulled over my hair like the wind might still recognize me. The town hadn't changed much. The gas station still had the same sun-faded lottery sign and crooked air pump. The diner's marquee now advertised gluten-free pie, but the cook's boots on the back step were still the same brown, cracked leather. I didn't stop. I drove slow past the outskirts of where Whitman soil began, past the property line that once felt like a prison fence. The house appeared like it always had, standing too tall, casting too long a shadow. But this time there was no weight behind the silhouette. It was different now. The siding had been repainted a soft cream, the shutters a calming navy blue. Solar panels glittered on the roof like a silent declaration of the future. The broken porch swing was gone, replaced by 2 Adirondack chairs and a hanging fern. A wooden sign staked in the yard read, "The Hearth House, a place for her." I parked a block away and walked the rest on foot. No one looked twice at me. Through the windows, I could see movement. Women walking through the kitchen, carrying trays of fresh bread and pitchers of iced tea. The air smelled like rosemary and citrus, and a life that no longer needed to be whispered into vents. There was laughter. Laughter where there had once been screaming. A girl, maybe 12, walked past one of the side windows with a basket of towels. She had short braids and oversized socks, and she paused, noticing me through the glass. We locked eyes. She didn't know who I was. She didn't need to. But she waved. Slow and kind. I lifted my hand in return and smiled. "You'll never know what I saved you from," I whispered. And then I turned. I didn't walk around the house. I didn't ask to go inside. That place had enough ghosts to sort through, and none of them needed my name anymore. At the mailbox, I pulled a sealed envelope from my coat pocket and slid it in. Inside was $5,000 in cash, every penny I'd received from selling the last piece of Whitman timberland that had gone untouched since my father died. I didn't label it with my name. Just a note inside that read, "For her future. Let her choose the lock she needs." I stood there for one more breath, staring at the painted wood and fresh garden beds where my old nightmares used to bloom, and then I walked back to the car. The engine turned over with a soft rumble. The sun sat low over the trees, casting everything in gold, not holy, just honest. As I pulled away, the mirror showed me the house getting smaller behind me. I didn't slow. I didn't blink. I never looked back. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something that would outlive them. It started in a basement, not mine this time, but the kind churches rent out for meetings that no one wants to advertise. Fold-out chairs, flickering fluorescents, a smell somewhere between coffee grounds and damp concrete, 10 women, 4 pens, a single whiteboard with the word re-entry written across it. I stood at the front, not as a speaker or a case study, but as Ellie, no title, no credentials, just someone who'd made it out and figured out how to keep going. The nonprofit took shape slowly, like breath-filling new lungs. We called it First Light. The mission was simple: help women coming out of captivity, cults, and coercive control find more than just shelter. We gave them keys, paychecks, decisions, space. No surveillance, no savior complexes. Every staff member was a survivor, including me. We didn't have a building at first, just donated space, time, and an old van with a heater that worked 60% of the time. But word spread. A local therapist offered use of her office one night a week. A bakery donated unsold loaves on Thursdays. One of the women, Shonda, taught herself QuickBooks and became our financial lead. Hope became infrastructure. I hired carefully, quietly. I didn't want fame. I wanted permanence. At night, I still wrote. One winter, I compiled everything into a manuscript, not a memoir. There were no names, no exact dates, just pieces. Fractures turned into form. I titled it, "The Basement Didn't Win." I published it anonymously. The first printing sold out in 3 days. People whispered about the author. Some claimed she was a trauma counselor in Colorado. Others thought it was ghostwritten by a therapist for one of her patients. No one knew. That's what made it powerful. The story wasn't mine anymore. It was ours. In the spring, I got a letter postmarked from the upstate correctional facility where Colby was serving his sentence. It wasn't addressed to Ellie Rose Whitman. It was addressed to Lena. I didn't open it. 3 weeks later, I received confirmation from the court. Colby's appeal had been denied. Permanently. The legal footnote read, "No evidence of prosecutorial error. Sentence upheld." Meanwhile, Wade's financial ruin played out in slow, petty headlines. After losing the estate lawsuit, he'd tried to start a landscaping company with borrowed money and overpromises. He was sued twice, defaulted on taxes, and eventually filed Chapter 13. A cousin emailed me about it, attaching an image from a local paper. Wade, older and heavier, pushing a mower in front of a rental duplex. I didn't reply. The past didn't deserve oxygen. The future did. We secured our first grant by summer. First Light moved into a real building, an old craftsman-style home with creaky stairs and too many closets. We turned those closets into writing nooks, places where women could sit and breathe and believe that stories didn't have to end in basements. On our opening day, the mayor sent flowers. A survivor sent her diary. The note inside read, "This is the first time I've written in pen." That night, I returned home to my own cottage tucked deep in the woods. I stepped onto the porch, listening to the wind flick through pine needles. No sirens, no engines, no footsteps behind me. I reached my front door. No alarm system, no deadbolt, no barricade, just a simple knob and a brass handle. I turned it and walked inside. They buried me in darkness. I'll do the house, and lit the world. The bonfire crackled against the October sky, tossing sparks into the cold air like fireflies trying to rewrite the stars. Behind me, laughter rolled up from the yard, real, unguarded. The kind that only lives in women who've learned how to take up space again. We were celebrating 6 months of First Light, 6 months of journals filled, doors closed only when they wanted them closed, and women who no longer flinched at their own reflections. The logs popped, splitting down the middle. The smell of smoke curled around my clothes, dry pine and cedar. It didn't trigger anything. Not anymore. Shauna passed me a tin mug of cider and flopped onto the bench beside me, her knees dusted in ash from teaching one of the girls how to build a fire with nothing but flint. Across the flames, Danny, the youngest in the group, stood with her hands tucked under her hoodie sleeves. She looked barely 20, though she'd lived a life 5 times longer in trauma. Her voice was quiet but sure. "So what happened to you?" she asked, blinking at me through the glow. It wasn't accusatory. It was curiosity, raw and reverent. I looked into the fire for a long moment. The flames didn't blink. They weren't asking me to relive anything, just to be. "I lived," I said simply. Someone exhaled like they'd been holding breath for years. That was enough. No one pushed. No one needed the rest of the story. They knew the shape of it. Every woman here had crawled through her own basement, literal or not. The details were different. The silence afterward was the same. We toasted with cider and split marshmallows over coals that glowed deep orange. "You ever miss it?" Shonda asked beside me. "The house?" "Number the past, the version of you who made it out." I thought about that for a while. "I don't miss her," I said. "But I respect the hell out of her." A wind swept through the trees, stirring the edges of the fire, making everyone pull their jackets tighter. I rose and stepped a few feet back toward the picnic table, where I'd left a thick, leather-bound journal beside the cider jug. I sat down and opened it. Blank pages, fresh spine. No soot smears. No tears. No secrets pressed between the lines. Just space. I uncapped my pen and stared at the first page. The ink trembled slightly at first, not from fear, but gravity. I wrote, Lena Rose Whitman. I paused. The name sat heavy and alive at the top of the page. I underlined it. Once. Then I closed the journal. Behind me, the women broke into another round of laughter. Shauna was telling the story about how she once faked a flu to avoid a cult leader's purity tests, and now she was teaching middle school algebra with the same poker face. Danny started dancing barefoot in the grass, and no one stopped her. The world didn't end when she moved. The fire spit another burst of sparks skyward, and the light hit the branches just right, a soft, golden shimmer like the night had leaned in to listen. I stood there with Lena in one hand and Ellie in the other, not trading them, holding both, because surviving wasn't about choosing who to be. It was about owning the whole story, and I did. They tried to bury me in that house. I turned it into a monument.